right, some, of course, have dubbed this conflict between Russia and Ukraine as a war over resources, even just taking a look at Trump's interventions. And some have also dubbed it, highlighted the ability of Russia to maintain its monopoly on oil and gas supply to Europe as being another subtle prompt for this war. Most recently, we saw Zelensky shut off Russian gas taps, refusing to renew the transit contract and ending the flow of Russian gas through Ukrainian territory. We're going to explore, of course, the energy aspect of this conversation, the oil and gas part of this conversation. And joining us all the way from Abuja, we have the Managing Director of Marque and Synergy, Dosu Odekunle. It's great to have you in, Dosu.
Same here, and thank you for having me, Joanna.
Always a pleasure. Now, aside from the more obvious Ukraine's potential membership of NATO, there's also, been a prompt for the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. There's a less obvious one, right? Looking at the land Ukraine has annexed and sought to claim. Let us into how Ukraine was becoming a growing threat to Russia's gas monopoly in Europe.
Right. So, I mean, they have, as with all nations and their neighbors, there's always history that goes back, way back. And Ukraine has always been the conduit to which Russia has flowed its oil. So, there are pipelines that are built into Europe, majorly like veins that run from Russia, and they pass through Ukrainian land. And Ukraine used to charge Russia like a transit fee for gas to get into the other parts of Europe. And things used to happen. There used to be, in quote, like stolen volumes were missing, if I can put it that way. And it used to cause issues in the past with Russia. And then Russia looked to, look for alternative routes. That was through Turkey, and then a direct one through the Northern Sea to Germany, just to, deal with the Ukraine issue. So that had always been a problem. It had grown over the years. And then Russia used to still pump through Ukraine. And, obviously they were having spats, small issues. As way back as, the first, the annex of Crimea, that was in 2014. Those issues added to, the flow of gas through Ukraine. And, obviously, Ukraine trying to hold on to that source of revenue from Russia. But that has all changed. Russia has found other ways to move its gas, and Europe has found other ways to gain gas. I think Ukraine is probably the one losing out in this structure at the moment. Ukraine does have natural gas that it produces itself, but that has been on a decline since I think the late 70s and early 80s.
Okay, interesting. So, in what ways would you say Russia's position as a major player in oil and gas, how would you say that has served as leverage for them? And some will even say a weapon, that they have weaponized this, right, in this war. Is that what, would you say is gagging Europe in mediating in the conflict?
Okay, yes, Russia is them against the world, so they're using the tools they have to fight, this fight. It's not just Ukraine they're fighting, but they're also fighting the West, and those that have put sanctions against them. So this weaponization of energy is not the first time. In the 80s, under Gorbachev, what Russia used to do was, very aggressive. Someone was going to get independence. Someone was going to, express some certain level of liberty. Russia would restrict, gas and energy supplies to them aggressively. Now it is just hidden under economic stories. Oh, the market moved here, and blah, 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 blah. So for this war, what Russia has essentially done in terms of weaponizing their energy, Europe suffered the first bout, when gas was stopped for a while, and there was a heavy winter. I remember this started in February, exactly 3 years ago, and Europe were the first victims, and that led to a spike in energy. And interestingly, the timing couldn't have been worse. Remember that in COP26, I believe, had just said they want to shut down fossil fuel investments and shift into net zero was the target, and the world ran with it. So investments for oil and gas, were off the table. It was not even transition energy was not even a discussion. It was, they would kill off all forms of fossil fuels, and then the war starts, and then Europe has a tough winter, and Russia weaponized it. They used it to the best of their ability, cutting off supplies and also charging extra for what was flowing through the other areas.
Of course, they used what they had, or they're using what they have at the moment. Thank you for that, Dosu. Let's come to Afua Hagan, our international correspondent. And in terms of the cost of this war right now, Dosu has highlighted the fact that it seems to be Russia, or it is Russia, against the rest of the world. How has Russia held up, in this fight, especially with the cost of this war?
To this war, Joanna. I mean, there's first of all the human cost of the war. 500,000 people, whether that is troops, civilians, have been killed or injured in this war. And that's just the estimates that we have. Those estimates could be much higher because of the methods of counting people that have been killed, people that are buried under the rubble. Let's look at the infrastructure costs of this war. You have entire cities like Mariupol that have been pretty much leveled. I mean, 3 years ago today, we had Kiev that was trying to be taken by Russian soldiers, and huge amounts of damage done to Kiev as well. I mean, today you have a conference taking place there featuring world leaders. Life still goes on, but like I said, you do have some cities like Mariupol, like Bakhmut, that have been absolutely leveled. In early 2024, it was estimated that the damage to those cities, the damage to the infrastructure was about $500 billion. And to rebuild those cities and to restructure them, including Kiev, could be up to $1 trillion as well. And where does that money come from? That's the real question. Does that come from aid from the United Nations or from the EU? We know that America is talking about possibly withdrawing its support. Let's talk about the economic collapse. If we talk about agriculture, the backbone of the Ukrainian economy, that has been devastated. Industrial output, of course, has plummeted as well. And like I said, those reconstruction costs looking about $1 trillion. So there's many costs to this war, to this invasion that Russia hosted against the Ukraine. And remember as well, those costs will come to Russia also. We've got sanctions, new sanctions announced today by the United Kingdom. You've had sanctions throughout this 3-year phase of the war as well. And those sanctions hurt the Russian economy at first, although the Russian economy has grown afterwards. And so, yes, like I said, many, many costs to this war.
Indeed. And I mean, cost of the war, cost to rebuild as well. Thank you so much for that, Afia. Coming back to you, Dosu, right? Oil prices, right? We know that some are saying, and it's been interesting to get your projections, oil prices are coming down. Trump's mantra has been drill, baby, drill. Russia is already selling oil at a discount. So how will they can they afford to continue to fund this war? It appears you're muted, Dosu. Right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So regardless of the price of crude, as long as it doesn't drop below the sanction prices, I think Russia should be good. So when America capped, part of the sanctions capped Russian prices to $60 per barrel, crude is still doing 74, that's Brent. And so it's not really affecting them. What has actually happened is that the flow went elsewhere. And so they're actually able to still generate a lot of money. They're currently the largest supplier of crude to China, and then followed by that by India. So where this oil used to go in all over Europe and as far as the Americas, that isn't happening anymore. But Asia is still in bed with Russia. And then Russia developed that channel to sell to them. Another thing that America did was, the sanctions that were imposed was the banning of Russia from SWIFT financial system to freeze their assets.
Right.
Russia went in with theirs, I think, SP PSF or so, thereabout. They created that, and they're actually able to trade with China and India and other smaller parties. So they're still selling crude. As the last speaker said, the economy actually expanded. It shrunk at first in the first year, and then it continued to increase. So what did Russia do? They sold more of their crude at that lower price, and therefore they were actually able to keep on funding the war and continue to prosper as a nation. There's still damage, but they do have a lot of money coming in. Russia is currently the third largest producer in the world in terms of crude output.
I mean, it takes a lot of strategy to hold, that position. But obviously, the tag for this special is a needless war. Who wins? So what assets, what markets? We know that this war has somewhat reshaped, the oil and gas trade and the markets. So who emerges a winner in this war, or who wins? Who benefits? What assets benefit? What countries benefit from this war from an oil and gas perspective? Dosu.
Sorry, I didn't hear that question. I think I was frozen for a second there.
All right. I was, referring to what assets or what countries benefit from an energy perspective from this war.
Okay, from an energy perspective, I'll say China and India have profited the most. Quietly, Saudi. I don't think I want to go into that, but Saudi has profited. But the two greatest beneficiaries are, as countries, is China and India. Then the other markets that have profited is the shipping market. So if those in the trading space will have heard of shadow fleets. So these are oil and gas tankers who switch off their radars and how they are tracked, and they're actually able to sail to Russia and move the oil. Now, because they're moving in the shadows, in quote, they made a lot of money because it's illegal for them to have gone there. And the same thing for banking lines. A lot of money was moved into the Middle East and into pseudo accounts for Russian money to move out. So a lot of people did benefit. And in this cycle, even though they're not the energy space, I would say the warmongers, the guys who are making weapons and tech, especially the cybersecurity level and physical weapons, they probably profited the most from this war.
Interesting perspective there, Dosu, and of course that's all happening on the ground. Thank you very much, Dosu Odekunle, joining us from Abuja, and of course our international correspondent, Afua Hagan.